if life includes online and offline, then our discipleship and our community does as well. And then what does that mean for the church?
Online church is here to stay, but is that a good thing? Let's talk about it with pastor and author Michael Huerter on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. You always have a place at our table. In case you were wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is here. Some people get turned away from bars and nightclubs. Matthew gets locked out of Facebook.
Why does it keep happening? John!
Does it really?
It totally does. They're like, hey, we blocked somebody from getting into your... It's me! Let me in!
Tough bouncer.
I don't know why, yeah.
Ask one of your kids for help.
Yeah.
Matthew is our executive producer. Our producer, Jinx, is in his little glass booth. Jinx wants to create a spin-off from the Amish. The new community can't use any technology from after 1994.
Oh.
Wow.
Be kind, rewind, I guess.
Yes.
In our one-man IT department, John Myers is in the tech bunker. As John knows, I don't listen to Rage Against the Machine, but I often rage against the machine. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. Speaking of technology, George reminds you that you can text Key Life at 28950 and donate, for heaven's sake. And Kathy is the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy says today is something called National Punch Day. She thinks it's about the drink, but be careful. We got an absolutely fascinating program today. Matthew Huerter serves as a pastor at Holmeswood Baptist Church in Kansas City, Missouri, where he leads worship and works to build community and connection. He also holds a PhD from Baylor University, and his new book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is The Hybrid Congregation, a practical theology of worship for an online era. Before we go anywhere, Michael, I'm an old guy, I'm a Luddite, and I don't like anything you wrote.
Well, his
But
name
I'm
was
also
okay.
not stupid, so I know that some of this... I mean, I used to get angry when Schuler did the parking lot thing, and I used to say, that's not church, and I'm going to be open to being convinced. What kind of reaction are you... Has the book been out a long time?
Since June.
What kind of reaction are you getting?
It has been largely very positive. Of people seem to be appreciative of the book and interested in the questions that I'm trying to address in it. There has been a little bit of pushback of kind of that, wanting to say no to online church, say no to using technologies in these different ways, concern about what it means and how it might impact the church, which I think is very valid. So I think it's been generally positive for me, but I think it also invites a little bit of controversy just due to the nature of the subject matter.
All kidding aside, I think this is a very important book and a very important discussion for us to have. I told our board once when they suggested we get a website that it was like a CB radio and it would pass, which will give you some idea of where I came from. But I've grown up and matured a bit, man. And if we don't talk about this and if we don't deal with it, we're going to be left in the dust. Our churches, now that they don't have to live stream, are churches stopping it, or are they just letting it go so that the lazy people without convictions can stay home, or what?
As far as I can tell, it seems like, most churches felt kind of forced and shoved into live streaming their services during COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown. That was true of my church as well when I was back at Baylor University. And I think since then, it's been kind of the norm that churches that have that setup are going to continue to use it. But for me, and the question that's in the book is a bit broader than just should church be live streamed on our Sunday services, but more a broader question of how do we engage with this technology. And I think there will be more changes down the road in terms of how this works in a world that includes online and offline kind of in this hybrid nature.
Yeah.
To me, it's more than just a streamed service from a Sunday in the sanctuary. Yeah.
I'm kind of big on, quote, the holy kiss, and it's hard to do that online. That's the issue, isn't it? I mean, can you really have... Now, I understand a concert, and you're a musician, and I have been moved deeply sometimes online with some of the music that I've watched and listened to. Church and worship, which is what your book is about, moves into a whole nother area, doesn't it?
Yeah, so when I think about what works and what doesn't in regards to using technology for building community, for me, it's less about thinking, are we replacing in-person church with online church? Because I don't think that's our goal. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think sometimes it can work as a substitute for people in very particular circumstances. But more what I'm trying to grapple with is we live in a world where most of our lives includes online and offline interactions. It to me, it wouldn't make much sense in my own life and communication and relationships to talk about, well, should we expect a marriage, for example, to not use technology? That seems a little odd. Like you're going to communicate with your spouse, text them, potentially when you're on the way home or to pick up something from the grocery store. It's just natural to use these technologies as a part of our everyday lives. So I think church, it makes sense for that to be a part of that as well. So while I do think things like stream services and online worship experiences are a part of that picture, it's broader and includes kind of this overall, if life includes online and offline, then our discipleship and our community does as well. And then what does that mean for the church?
One of the churches here, we're in Orlando, and one of the churches here in Northland, when they built they were forward-looking in ways that most churches aren't. And they built a technologically very sophisticated situation in their church. They were, for a time, doing joint worship services with a church in Africa, with people literally singing duets, one in Orlando and one in Africa during the worship service that was live streamed. They also assigned a pastor to be an online pastor. And the comments that people were giving were ongoing during the service. When I preached there often, I would tell them to turn that stuff off. I'm preaching here, and I don't want people talking while I'm preaching.
And that was pre-COVID.
And that was, it really was. In fact, it was 3 or 4 years pre-COVID. And so they were thinking in those terms. And often they would say, the worship leader would say, we welcome the congregation in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the congregation here and there. And man, I was blown away with that. As a Luddite, I thought, I don't believe this. Was that a good thing?
That is exciting to me in some ways to think of, it's an interesting expression to me of the global church, of community
Yeah.
across this geographical distance. I wonder what that means for partnerships across that distance of engaging in ministry and missions together. That takes on a whole new meaning, I imagine, for that congregation, in both places. So I think that's an exciting possibility. Part of what I think is important to acknowledge is that not every church can or will do that. And I don't think that, needs to be every church striving to create something of such high production value. But I think that's a pretty incredible example that you shared.
It's good. Guys, you got to listen to this, so don't you dare turn this off. You got to think about it. You got to discern. You got to see what God's doing. I mean, God wasn't surprised with the internet. He didn't say, what in the world are you turkeys doing to my church? And so we got to ask what God is doing and then maybe make some decisions on it. The book is The Hybrid Congregation, a practical theology of worship for an online era. This is hard work. We got to rest on occasion, have some cookies and milk, and come back. Thanks for joining us. We're talking to Michael Huerter and his new book, and it's different and it's important. The title is The Hybrid Congregation, a Practical Theology of Worship for an Online Era.
Michael, the church we go to is pretty forward as far as embracing technology. It's, lights and all the stuff. They were live streaming every single service, all this stuff. Only recently they backed off of that. So they'll eventually post later in the day one of the morning services. And their reasoning was, if you're watching online, you should be here. You shouldn't be watching. And I will say personally, there's days where you're like, I'm kind of sick of not being in bed. We'll just do TV church. And I get it. I'll raise my hand for that one. I've been there. So that's their reasoning of not rejecting technology, but carving that out and backing away from that. Yeah. Agree or disagree, I could see the logic there. But beyond that, is that where people are pushing back, where they say, no, this is not layering on to the in-person stuff? People are supplanting, using this. Is that the pushback that you get on this, or what's people's beef with your premise here?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the conversation. So one of the questions that comes up a lot is, oh, well, church needs to be embodied. We need to be, in physical community with each other in the same space. And I'll be first to say there's a lot of value to that. But I don't want to use language or theology of embodiment in a way that ends up excluding human bodies from community. So what I mean by that is there are some people that really benefit from being able to engage on an even playing field with church community through the use of technology. I think about people who are homebound due to illness, people who have various disabilities, those kinds of things. And while, maybe there are people for whom it's an excuse to not get out of bed, and I can understand that impulse on a given Sunday. I wonder sometimes if I were not required to be on church? How
If you
often
weren't
would
gonna
I
be
go?
fired.
Yeah.
Right.
This
There's
again.
a little bit of a different motivator for me. But I've gotten to know people in my community who actually aren't far from the church, but due to health concerns, they physically cannot leave the house on a Sunday, and they become meaningful parts of our community. And for me, it's been a shift to recognize these are not, passive consumers of content we are producing. They're a part of our community. So that means pastoral visitations. That means deacons caring for them, accompanying them to hospital visits. That means, them getting to record a testimony or, a prayer part of the worship service. And that can be included in our worship service in the sanctuary. So they can lead in worship as well. And that doesn't have to be excluded for them because of their physical challenges. So that question of embodiment is one of those that comes up for me of, don't we need to be together? And I would say yes, but you know, the early church had deacons assigned to care for people who were being overlooked, as food was being distributed. And I think there is a part of church community that has always been networked through the epistles, through letters, through all these things. And I'm okay with that, broadly speaking. Other questions that come up are often around sacraments or ordinances, so things like communion and baptism. And I don't address that directly in the book because that's something that is going to be inflected differently in different theological traditions and different denominations. Each church, each tradition is going to have their own understanding of how do we think about and practice, the Lord's Supper, communion. How do we think about baptism? What does that mean for us? So I want to, provide space for pastors and denominational leaders to kind of take that and run with it, to teach their communities in ways that are in alignment with their theology. But for instance, at my church, in a Baptist tradition, we take a symbolic understanding of the Lord's Supper. And a way that we apply that is we don't have an issue telling folks, hey, if you're joining us online, feel free to find food and drink that you have in your home and join with us in this communal sharing and remembering Christ's love and the significance of Christ's sacrifice and presence with us in the everyday and mundane. So those are some of the main things that people bring questions about, the idea of the importance of embodiment, the sacraments or ordinances. And then I think also just the broader assumption or culture that we don't want to be producing entertainment or content that is consumed passively. And I would agree with that. And that's partly where, while I think there is value in sharing worship services online, to me that's only a part of the church's broader engagement with technology. I think of things like Zoom conversations and Bible studies and ways for people to be engaged in community on a more ongoing basis than just tuning in on a Sunday morning to watch a service where they're not really interacting with somebody. Similar to how we would say maybe just slipping into the back pew and then sneaking out at the end of a service isn't a full engagement with church that we would hope for everybody. The same is true online, I think, as well. There can be interactions that are very meaningful and build to significant relationships. And ideally, I think, even just realistically speaking, I think most congregations are somewhere along the spectrum of engaging with their online technology and also incorporating more traditional or in-person interactions and things like that. So for me, it's thinking about a hybrid congregation is almost all of our churches somewhere along that line, from using technology and also having kind of an in-person space. I think where we will see more in the future, not just in church, but in society generally, is whereas I think in the past we've had more communities that start offline and then maybe use some technology to augment what they're doing, we're going to have more connections that start online and then people choose to take that interaction and relationship into a physical space that they share together. So I think that's maybe a direction that we're headed.
The church to which I referred earlier really did a good job of that pre-pandemic. They would have often people in other congregations giving their testimony, sharing some in the music. Often they would have people in 3 or 4 different areas with different instruments lifting up the worship music, and you felt like you were a part of it. And I get that. I understand how you can do the Eucharist Baptism is a little bit different. I mean, you Baptists are going to have a bathtub. We Presbyterians could do it with a cup, and it's a lot easier that way. I just want you to know that.
Well, most people have a shower.
Yeah,
in
you
their
can just
home.
stand in the
That's
shower.
right.
It's the top of the head that matters. Michael, this is good. Hey, listen, if you haven't thought about this, it's time you did. I mean, this is not going away. I know. I have prayed that God destroy it. I've told people it was evil. I have done everything that I know to do, and for some reason, God still allows it. So if he allows it, we had better learn about it and learn how to use it effectively and for his glory. So don't go anywhere. I don't want to be manipulative or anything, but if you do, you'll get the fever and die. Don't go anywhere. Hey, we're hanging out with Michael Huerter, and we like him a lot. You're going to like his book because it's not spoken from Sinai. He's asking the right questions and giving some answers that if you're a leader in the church, you ought to be aware of this book. And if you're in the church, you ought to maybe have a small group that's spending some time studying it. Matthew, you don't have
Michael.
a personal, what'd you say?
Michael.
Oh, what did I call him?
Matthew.
Matthew?
Although
That's
you might have
Matthew.
been, you
You're
might have been
Michael.
talking to
I'm
him.
doing the best I can, okay? Michael, give us the website for your church. You don't have a personal one because you're not a celebrity yet, but you're fast getting there, and you will do that.
Oh, no.
But just give us the church's website, and people can go and find out about you and some of the ministries there.
Yeah, the church is at holmeswood.org. That's Holmes, like Sherlock Holmes, wood.org. We're actually going to be redesigning the website very shortly. So, yeah, we just went through a rebranding process for the church and all that. So there's more to come, but that's where you can find us. Yeah.
Michael, interestingly, as I've been listening to you, a couple of the questions that I had, you've already touched on the answers. So I'm just going to expand on that just a little bit. I can remember on Easter Sunday when we were in the middle of COVID, and I posted on Facebook afterwards, I don't believe I've ever sat in my PJs in my recliner with an English muffin and scrambled eggs going to the Easter service. I might be able to get used to this. And so I know that there is that in all of us, when we get up on Sunday morning and say, oh, I just don't know if I want to do this again. But it didn't take very long, and it was an actual service that I was watching where they were observing communion. And it was the pastor was very serious and, very gracious, and just got right down in the face of the camera and said, if you're watching this online, we want you to join with us and everything. Just, go to the cupboard and get yourself a piece of bread and a glass of water. And that was the point at which I said, no, I can't, for me, I can't do this. There is something about the gathering together of God's people. And even in the New Testament, where it says, don't forsake that. I thought, I can't do this with a sip of water and a piece of stale bread and have the meaning that I think it's supposed to have. How do we how do we get around that? How do we deal with that? What do we do with don't forsake the gathering together with other believers?
We redefine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, I do think that is very important. And that's why, like, in my own personal approach to this, this is, a bit beyond the book of things I hope that church leaders can consider. But for me personally, I do believe that gathering together is important. I think it can take different forms and look in different ways. We were having a little conversation kind of off air about the significance of the temple, and I think about the ways that even the Jewish faith kind of had to renegotiate based on historical events and what's happening. When you're in exile, what does worship look like? When you're at the temple, here's what worship looks like. When the
Right.
temple is destroyed, what does worship look like? And there's this kind of renegotiation and figuring out how to connect with your faith tradition that happens across historical changes. So I think COVID, the pandemic, was a huge moment of that for I think all faith traditions, but the Christian church in particular, as we're talking about here. But yeah, I do think that for me, again, the question is not, should we do online church instead of gathering as a community? Because I think for me, the answer is no. But I do believe that the online world that we live in is significant to our faith, is significant to our lives and our discipleship. So the church can be a part of that, not ignore or exclude that. But I do think that, yes, it's important and valuable for us to be gathered together. Maybe that is in the church building, maybe that's in other environments as well.
We have had a number of guests talking about worship, both here and in England and Scotland, where they're seeing, and we are too, kind of a mini awakening. And the interesting part of it is that awakening is very traditional. I mean, young people are seeking out some things that you wouldn't expect them to go, where you wouldn't expect them to go. Places where there's significant liturgy, where the old stuff, it may be new to them, but they're drawn to it. So I don't think we're ever going to kill off the congregation meeting together. That's always going to be true. But if we ignore this part, we're going to miss something really, really important. And I think in some churches, we are missing it. We'll talk more about it when we get back. In case you were wondering about the name of the book, and you ought to read it, The Hybrid Congregation, A Practical Theology of Worship for an Online Era. It's not an easy book. It started as a doctoral dissertation, so you got to put your thinking cap on. But the author is a good guy, and he's ironic, and you'll like what you read. So get a copy of it and read it. You ought to be thinking about this. The Hybrid Congregation. We're going to continue. Don't go anywhere. Hey, thanks for spending this time with us. That's a gift, and we consider it that. We also consider that we're giving you a gift, so don't get so self-righteous about it.
In fact, you ought to feel like you have to make a donation.
Yeah, and send it in. By the way, if you haven't yet subscribed to the weekly Key Life email, why? Do you feel like you don't deserve good things or something? While you're thinking about it, no, wait till the program is over. Go to keylife.org/subscribe.
Michael, there's a sense in which, churches dealing with technology is not new. I mean, we've been faced with an explosion of it in a sense through COVID, but we talked about all the way back to the diaspora, the Jewish people figuring out how they worship God away from the temple and so on. all the way up to radio preachers. And when I was a kid, our church service or parts of it would be on TV for people like shut-ins and so forth. How many people have come to the Lord through Billy Graham evangelistic television programs all over the world?
True.
And so it's not a new concept, but the way you've analyzed it, and especially since it's become so ubiquitous for everybody, at times where you almost didn't have a choice but to face the technological aspect. But all that aside, I was interested in following up a little bit on Steve's comment that with the technological opportunities, and that especially it seems like younger people tend to or be drawn to that. We hear stories about and see reports about maybe particularly younger people, but people coming back to worship services, and especially the growth in traditional worship services. Do you see a relationship to what you studied, which I know was not directly related to that, but do you see a relationship with that?
Yeah, I do. I think what comes to mind for me around that, thinking about younger people coming back to churches and particularly to more traditional or more liturgical worship spaces. I one of the ways that I think churches maybe mistakenly engage with online technology is in the thought of, oh, if we project our services online and stream them live, then lots of people are going to get to know about our church and we'll grow. And, I think we are in danger of slipping back into the church growth movement, kind of that
Mm.
mindset of trying to use this technology to
Mm.
build the church in that kind of primarily numeric and monetary way. And I'm a little hesitant of that, and I think that often carries with it assumptions of, oh, well, young people, they want this kind of music, they want this kind of service, they want this kind of lights and fog machines and such, and that's how you reach the youths. I think there's that kind of logic that comes in, but I think instead I would rather see the church say, you know what, there's this attention economy on the internet where so much is based around getting likes and shares and trying to get as many people as possible to look at your thing, watch your service, see your church. Uh, I'm not sure that that necessarily aligns with the call of Christ to the church. It's not necessarily in opposition to it always. I do think about, uh, televangelists and radio preachers who have reached many people, and for good. But having said that, I tend to think I want to take more of a people first approach to using technology. It's not that there is this new technology, therefore we must use it or else will be irrelevant. For me, it's more of a question of, given my local church, my community, my people, what are the resources and tools available to me that I can use to connect with them? Yes, to reach out to new people, but even in my mind, thinking about my church, I'm more in the mindset of who are people in Kansas City, in my area, that haven't yet been able to connect with Holmeswood, my church, and would really like to, and then how can we connect with them, as opposed to broadcasting to the widest possible audience. So when I think about technology and this trend of people maybe coming back to church, but maybe even doing that in the ways that, you know, in contrast, you might think about, we built this church from the ground up with the model of how do we attract young people? How do we make this the most exciting new thing? That's maybe not what people want.
Yeah.
I do think there can also be an element of young people are very comfortable with these technologies and it's a normal part of their life. Um, and having said that, there's a lot of value in unplugging and in being able to experience something outside of that typical deluge of digital content. And I think church and other forms of community can provide that. So I think there's a push and pull in engaging with technology in the church, where from a formational standpoint, the ways we treat people online, the ways we act using technology matters, and that's a part of our discipleship. but also taking a step back from that technology in different ways at different times can be very beneficial, and people can be renewed and feel more connected with other people, more connected with God, with meaning, with purpose, if they're able to kind of sidestep some of those things. And I think that's what some of these people who are, coming back to traditional liturgical, even low-tech churches, may be wanting to experience. But they probably also found that church by searching for their website or, connecting with somebody through social media first. So there's that tension of both for me.
Michael, we don't have much more time, but in a very practical way, your church is Holmeswood. What are some of the things that you're doing to make this a place of connection?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've been encouraged. I've been at this church about a year and a half, so it's a fairly new pastoral role for me.
And you don't have much power yet. I get that, but go ahead.
But it's been really wonderful to get to know these people, to be in the city, to build those relationships kind of over time, and recognize the ways that this is a lovely church that really wants to care for the community around us. And that's been really encouraging to me. So finding ways, what are the things happening in our city? How can we get engaged with that? What are the needs in our community? How can we be a part of meeting those? It's more than advertising. It's also, we've been able to do things like hosting a health fair in our church where people can come in, get health screenings, vaccinations, those kinds of things that maybe not be accessible to them. Lots of different opportunities for meaningful ministry, but it's been about recognizing the people first, and then seeing what can we do in our community.
Oh, good stuff. I don't know where this hour's gone, and all of us have about 40 more questions to ask you. But we're glad that you're there, and we're glad that you're thinking about it. Keep doing it. Are you working on something new?
Not quite yet.
Heck no.
Very early stages.
After that many years of
Still got
working on a
enough on my plate.
dissertation?
Give him a break.
Yeah, you're saying I ain't
Taking a bit
doing
of a
this
breather,
again.
but yeah.
Michael, God bless you. Thanks for writing this book and being with us. Guys,
Thank you so much for having me.
don't go anywhere. That was an interesting and informative hour with Michael. I really am old. I really am a Luddite. That means somebody that doesn't want to be on social media or have anything to do with technology. Those things, I was not just kidding about that. That's true. But I've repented because I think that like almost anything, everything, God is sovereign, and things don't just happen, they happen because He is sovereign. And sometimes those things that happen can have both good and bad implications, and that's true of the internet too. I saw a bumper sticker the other day said that you should be nice to your parents because they got through college without Google. And so there, for college students, there's good stuff, but there's good stuff for the church too. And I think this program was important, and the book is important, that we look around and say, how can we do this in a way that will tell people that God's not angry at them, that if they go to Him, they'll be surprised, that He's merciful, that He's kind, and that He's good. It's one thing for me to say that to my neighbor or to say it from a pulpit. It's another thing to begin to spread that around with a methodology that God has given that can take one comment from Jesus, I love you, is that okay, and spread it to millions of people In fact, we may have found the way a worldwide awakening could take place. But we got to say, God, you created it. I'm not happy with it, but show us so we can use it to glorify you. Good book, The Hybrid Congregation. All right, what are you going to do next week?
Well, I think this is going to be really exciting for us. I do have some bad news for you. We have replaced you.
Oh, my.
No, that's not bad news. Promises.
Next week, Matthew is going to be hosting, and we're going to have Crystal Downing with us, and her book is called The Wages of Cinema, a Christian aesthetic of film in conversation with Dorothy Sayers.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I don't know, be anybody better. You know, you're an award-winning film creator. So I'll listen.
All right.
Just don't screw it up.
I'll do my best.
Next time, same place, same people, except me. We hope you're going to be here next week. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.